founder of Heal the Oceans. She has a lot of other things she does. She's a diver, she's a journalist, she does a lot of things. But I'm not going to spend time telling you about that because she's got some really important things to share with us tonight, and I hope you join me in welcoming Hillary.
All right. It's really wonderful to have Santa Barbara City College putting a program like this together, to get the word out and to speak to a group like you is just something I love doing. And before we get into it, we've got some visuals, we have a little short video, and as I speak to you, you're going to find out about Heal the Ocean. I'm not here to just talk about Heal the Ocean, but the ocean itself. First of all, how many of you swim or dive or surf in the ocean? Wow. How many of you just love the ocean for meditation and to walk on the beach? You know, it's just, I don't know how Heal the Ocean would go in Wisconsin, no. And, you know, the Santa Barbara, this community is so wonderful for work like this because we are all ocean lovers. Heal the Ocean is basically, I'm just basically the big foghorn for all of you. All the feelings that every single one of you have about the sea is in everything I say and pound and do. Just to start out with, I'd like to, you know, a little bit of my background and how, you know, what goes into Heal the Ocean is kind of buried in there. But to start on the flip side, I'd like to talk a little bit about single interest environmentalism. You know, like, are we just alarmists? Today in the news press, we were actually called extremists. There was a letter to the editor to the Save the Ocean extremists. I thought, well, that's a nice honor. And because this situation is extreme. But backing up, in the 60s, when I was in my late 20s, don't anybody do any addition here, but I was watching television one night, and the CBS had this program on called Say Goodbye. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it was about the disappearing wildlife. And these cameras had gone up to the Arctic, and they had photographed these hunters that had gone up there, flew in by helicopter, located the polar bears, and then, you know, shot the mother and left the cubs. And I went into a rage and a frenzy that lasted about 2 years. And I was writing the president, you know, you're a turkey and everybody else is a turkey and this is just terrible, and the tule elk and the otters and the, you know, giraffes, everything that was disappearing. My husband, I was married at the time, he was a stage man, and we went around the world and set up underwater film festivals, and he would be lecturing. He said, well, my wife has made our checkbook look like the in-resident list of the LA Zoo, because we were supporting all these things. And then basically I made myself sick and depressed. And basically, when you are just railing at bureaucracy and calling everybody names, and you're not getting much done. And at one point in all this extremism, I was working for Skin Diver magazine as one of their early editors, and Mr. Peterson, bless his soul, and he had the top floor office suite, and it was one of those things where the elevator went up, the doors went open, and you walked right out into the lobby, and there was this big polar bear, because he was one of these people that liked to go up and shoot a bear. And I, during my lunch hour, would make a little note and say, do you know there are 2,000 bears left in the whole world? And then I would get in the elevator and push the button, look around and jump out and stick it on the bear, and jump back in the elevator and go down. And it went around Peterson Publishing Company that somebody was sticking notes on Peterson's bear. Well, it didn't do much, you know, it didn't save the bears at all, and didn't do much. And so from that point, I thought, you know, I'm just making myself ill. And so what I did from then on, after I was an editor for Skin Diver, I decided, okay, what I really care about has always been the ocean or wildlife. And what I would do is turn my attention and my efforts to writing about what was beautiful and what was there and to photograph. I was very fortunate to work for Skin Diver in the late 60s, and the cameras were just going underwater. I mean, the housings used to be as big as this podium, and as they got more refined, and it was an exciting time. Captain Cousteau was starting the Cousteau Society, and I got to work with him and all the Cousteaus, and Joe McGinnis, who was the first man to dive underneath the North Pole. And we all became friends, and we devoted ourselves to going around the world, to London, to Hawaii. This is before the Deep, and before Jaws, and before the Discovery Channel, and before underwater films became, on television. We had Mike Nelson doing this black and white bubbling in the tank, but we didn't know what was in the sea. So I felt really fortunate to be a part of this scenario, and from there I started covering the west coast of the United States for this ocean political newsletter that was published out of Washington, D.C. And interestingly enough, I was covering the Coastal Commission, and Naomi Schwartz, the first district supervisor of Santa Barbara, was one of the commissioners, so I got to watch everything she did. I watched what the Fish and Game did, and I watched what everybody did. And meanwhile, was going out and doing underwater adventures for magazines like National Geographic that sent me to dive in these sinkholes and caves of South Australia, and I dived these flooded earthquake falls of Death Valley, and I sort of got this reputation for doing kind of harebrained things underwater, but photographing and showing what is there. So from there, I moved back to Santa Barbara first my family had moved to Santa Barbara in the 50s, and I grew up on Miramar Beach. And that beach, I remember the tide pools, and we had a lobster trap out there, and there were kelp, and we were snorkeling and looking at what was offshore. So then I moved back to Santa Barbara after working in the publishing business in Los Angeles. I moved back here in '77, and some years later started working for the Santa Barbara News Press. And I went in, I really needed a job, and I went into the editor with a big pile of books and magazines I'd written about the ocean, and I said, well, Santa Barbara's the ocean, we need to cover the ocean, and I want to cover the waterfront. And I got the job. And so for 6 years, I covered the science that was being done out at UCSB. I covered the fishermen in the channel, the oil development, the dumping of drill muds, and so really got into a lot of research about what was going on in the Santa Barbara Channel. So with all that was sort of the basis. And then I went about in the intervening time, continuing with my freelance work and so forth. So the title of this series, and particularly this title tonight, is The Ocean in Trouble. Is the ocean really in trouble? Well, from the perspective of living on Miramar Beach and knowing what it was like in the 50s, and from the perspective of the thing that I was covering for the news press in the 80s, including one of the last things was this unbelievable thing I did that was called a sewage, it was a sewage roundup. There was a piece of paper from Washington that came across my desk one day that said that within 20 years, this was in 1980, within 20 years, all seafood in California would become inedible. So that made me really mad because of sewage. And so I called up, there are 5 sewer plants that are discharging into the Santa Barbara Channel. So I said, okay, I want to know what's being put out there. So I called the managers of every single one, all 5 of them. I said, what are you putting in, and what are you putting where is it going, and so forth. So 16 million gallons a day as we speak are just going into the ocean. 3 of those plants are dumping into the surf zone. The outfall pipes are in 20 feet of water or less. We can all hold our noses and dive down to that depth. So this has been going on. So with this in mind, with this as the background, are the oceans in trouble? there's a definite change. The thing about human nature is how quickly we become used to horrible things, like rolling blackouts. You know, oh, the lights went out, oh, it's just that. But, you know, I'm an ocean lover, and I swim in the ocean every day, year-round. I am a bodyboarder, I dive, and when the beaches started closing, I can't blame politicians. I mean, I've told the politician that even I say, well, I can swim over here, it'll pass. Well, then I'll just swim over here. And I was doing that and just kind of accepting this no swimming stuff that was going on. So I was doing a story on Clyde Beatty, who was a local surfboard shaper, about Santa Barbara surfboard shapers. He said, what are you doing writing a story about me? Look at this. And here was these questionnaire, the petition from a group called CURE, Clean Up Rincon Effluent, a group of surfers that were really getting tired of getting rashes, getting sick, getting all this stuff from surfing at the Rincon, which is one of the world's greatest surfing places. I thought, okay. So I called the news press, had a wonderful relationship with them, and Heal the Ocean really owes a lot to the media for getting this before the public. So I called Mr. Langford and said, John, I want to do an editorial on the closing beaches. He said, have at it, write as much as you want. So I wrote a 20-page manuscript. And this is a paper that is just, things are getting smaller and smaller, and they ran it in 2 full pages. And then I was going to go off to New York and see some friends, and lo and behold, the Sunday that it came out, which is beginning of August, first Sunday in August 1998, it was like a bomb had gone off. My phone just started ringing, people crying, we'll send you money, we'll do, you know, and that day, Naomi Schwartz, First District Supervisor, called me at home, and so did Lois Capps, our representative in Congress. And they said, Hillary, let's meet. You know, what do you think we should do? So, wow. And then somebody else called and said, I'm organizing a demonstration on the county administration building. Then an actor from Baywatch called me and said, I'm putting an ad in the paper for this demonstration. I said, well, I hope you guys all have a good demonstration. I'm going to be in New York. And this actor said, you are not. You are going to be here, and you're going to speak. And so I canceled my trip to New York. The demonstration, I had the meeting with Naomi Schwartz and Lois Capps, and at this meeting, we took with us, Jeff Young was also a co-founder. He had read my article for Accuracy, and Jeff was really onto DNA, the use of DNA in the environment, you know, to really identify what was going on. Because basically what was going on is, as this thing evolved, we knew the beaches were closed, we knew it was coming from somewhere, and we were doing tests that didn't tell us whether it was man decaying this or that, or lizards or dogs or whatever. So to do these tests and not end up with anything that you could use seemed a little ridiculous. And so we met with the supervisor and Lois Capps' assistant, Ben Romo, and took this DNA science. We said, this is how it worked. So Naomi turns to me and she says, knowing me from the 60s, she said, Hillary, we need a public pressure group, and you're perfect to do this. And why don't you do this? And I walked out of there. The demonstration, this was on a Thursday, and the demonstration was on the following Tuesday. And I went to the beach. Oh, you know, I mean, is this really what I want to do? Is just get in this big free-for-all. You know, going into this, that it's going to be a lot of work. I looked at the ocean and I thought, you know, how can I turn my back on something that has given me so much joy, so much pleasure, given me my career, You know, all of us in this room, when things are, I got to tell you this. I wasn't planning to tell you this. I just finished writing a book called Dancing on Waves, which has a lot to do about, the ocean, what it teaches us, and I had this beautiful ending. I've been working on this book for 4 years. And I was coming up the Miramar, the public steps at the end of, at Miramar, there at when you go back at the base of San Ysidro Lane. And I was coming up the stairs, and here came this woman. She was in her late 20s, and her face was just red with tears. I said, oh, it's probably some guy that dumped her. Something horrible had happened to her. And she was just distraught. And I didn't know this woman, but I just took her in my arms, and she just, sobbed and sobbed. She said, this is the worst day of my life. It's the worst day of my life. It's the worst day of my whole life. But if I can just get to the ocean, I'll be okay. How many of us have felt this way? So this public outcry that happened, speaking of my book, this handed me my conclusion. If I can get to the ocean, I'll be okay. So this public outcry, it was just enormous with the publication of this editorial, which we have over on the table, which is, sorry about the small type, but magnifying glass. I believe that it touched a nerve that in all of us, not just the fact that we can't go swimming when we want to, but it really went to our heart, our very existence. It depends on the ocean. We all know the story of our bodies containing the same relationship of potassium and minerals as the sea. We crawl down and walk from the sea. And our air depends on it. Our life depends on it. And I was amazed to find out that without the earth, the ocean sloshing around, the earth wouldn't even turn on its axis. Everything depends on the sea. So to defile the ocean to the point where we have no swimming side, that is something that we should never, ever, ever get used to. This is an abomination. It's really pathetic. And when we are putting spaceships on Mars and spending, I don't know how billion in 1 year on art, we should be able to fix this. It's a matter of money. So back to the single interest environmentalism and just railing on our elected politicians, right away, I knew, that was going to go nowhere. You could just sit there as Board of Science supervisors and go on. And it came to me, I didn't finish the story. We started Heal the Ocean. And at that demonstration, we announced ourselves. We had 1,000 flyers and 1,000 bumper stickers that all ran in the first rain because somebody did them overnight. But we announced ourselves, and right away, one of the first things we did was the Rincon was the seat of a very big problem where the surfers are most in the water. So to take a practical approach is where Heal the Ocean is coming from. Instead of banging on politicians, we say, okay, let's fix this ourselves. We have had years of ease, years of throwing away. The basic problem in this, if you think of the basic problem, is running water. From time immemorial, just camp next to running water. If you need to get rid of something, just get it in the water, it'll go away somewhere. And we are still basically doing this. We are still basically operating on this saying in the 50s and 60s that the solution to pollution is dilution. And we are still doing it, and we're saying we're not because we're just so, refined now. So what Heal the Ocean decided to do was to just go, instead of saying these homeowners are terrible people whose septic systems, there's 72 homes on septic system down there that are below sea level, and every time it rains, they've got problems. So I found some phone numbers, knew some people that lived there, and decided to call them up. Call up as many as I could and say, what's going on? You know, how is it in the winter for you? And they said, it's terrible. You know, we can't do the dishes, we can't do the washing, we can't, you know. And one person had sewage back up the living room. I said, how would you like to join the 21st century and be on sewer? And they said, yes. I mean, it was that simple. Well, then, with all of these cleanup things, as we get into some of the really big ones, you say, oh my God, it's the moon, it's going to cost $1 million, and how can you ever even think of this? Well, in our philosophy is when you are identifying the problem, have a solution in mind, because we know we can't, you know, spend billions of dollars and shoot for the moon. And my common question to engineers is this the moon or what? I mean, is it doable or what? So in the case of the Rincon, I called the Carpinteria Sanitary District and said, can you hook these people up? They said yes. Well, that was the end of that question. The next question is, how do we find out how, you know, what to do? Well, you do a sewer engineering study. Well, how much is that? I went to the engineers, Penfield Smith. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be going to engineers doing sewer studies. But that's basically what we do. And when I went to Penfield Smith, they said, okay, the Rincon sewer study would be $9,000. Well, that's doable. I called up Cure, I called up the county, I called up some other contributors, and everybody threw in $1,000, the homeowners threw in $1,000. How could they refuse? And we got a sewer engineering study. And so that lays out the blueprint, how it will be done, $2.9 million, and these homeowners agreed to pay this. We went to the state, their low interest loan for this. And so it worked out that over the extended time, 30 years, that they would be paying $2,000 a year for sewer assessment fees. Well, my little place in Summerlin is $900 a year, so I'd say, well, that's not bad. I mean, and the homeowners didn't think it was bad either, and we thought, wow, this is a piece of cake. And then we moved to Sandyland. They said yes for $1.5 million. We've got another study going for Sandpoint. That's where, you know, this is the area where the Moroccan thing is. You know that marsh is sitting there? The houses are above this marsh. It doesn't take a big rocket scientist to know that this can't be too good for these leach fields. We get into the septic system thing later. Actually, I'm not following any of my design here. But septic system, you know, I think, you know, I have to say that we were the first people that said, you know, septic systems are not, you know, really so cool, because the ground, you know, we think, well, we just put everything in the ground, it stays there. Well, it doesn't. We now know it travels. And septic systems work on the principle of leach fields, you know, where you put it all in, it percolates, and well, where is all this stuff going when it rains? It's going downhill. So, and there were some scientists in Florida that were in the meantime had worked it out, so they did put some kind of a virus in there, or, you know, a nice virus, and flushed it down a toilet in 15, you know, it was within 15 minutes they could find it on the reef in Florida. So we went to the Board of Supervisors, and Hannah Beth Jackson organized a joint hearing at the Board of Supervisors hearing room that was, you know, very good, where all this stuff was presented, and we started zeroing in on the septic system. Well, in the case of Rincon, everybody was just signing up, and then Montecito Sanitary District got on board, and then we raised some money for the Hope Ranch. Hope Ranch is 700 homes on septic system. And so we just thought, wow, we're on a roll, but oh my gosh. The next thing we knew that there's an official balloting that has to take place, and the homeowners vote to have their homes liened. You know, it shows up on your property tax bill. And so the balloting took place. You have to have a 51% majority. We had 74. and it was overwhelming that they wanted to do it. But then 5 homeowners came up with a lawsuit and stopped it because they said the EIR has to be done first before you lien our home. And they're right. I had no idea that this hadn't been done, that it had been done in the right place. But right now, that is the case, and we do not argue that. We don't think these homeowners are bad people, because this is something that should have been figured out, but it had not. But anyway, so what do you do about it? So we are right now working to get this EIR money. The Carpinteria Sanitary District had figured the cost of the EIR for Rincon in the assessment fees, but it was backwards. So they had planned for the EIR, they had budgeted for it, but now we have to get that money in advance. And the problem with this, of course, when you go to a homeowner association, let's say you guys are a homeowners association, and you want to get off septic, and I come in and say, let's do this, but you have to pay $300,000 first for this study. Well, you're going to throw mud pies at me and say, get out of here. So we are right now in the process of working with the county, not yelling at them, but working with them to see that within some budget somewhere that there can be temporary use of that money for the EIR studies, and then when the assessed, assuming that the EIRs are okay and that, you know, that if the project is okay, then we can, then that fund will go back, you know, after the homeowners are assessed. So we're working on that right now. The whole thing is to facilitate, to work together with government, to work with the other groups in town that are doing really great things. All of us are involved together to solve a problem, but it's got to be practical. All right. So that is part of part of one of the things we're doing. But you know, basically we have to keep asking ourselves, I keep asking myself, is this real? Is this really a real problem? Not only the signs there, but I was recently on assignment in Indonesia. Sometimes we really get so used to things that we just, oh, well, I'll think about it tomorrow. But I was in Indonesia and diving Komodo Island where the dragons are. And the ocean was just, it was exploding with life. We were swimming in the middle of sharks, manta rays, turtles, cuttlefish, fish everywhere. It was just exploding. I came back to Santa Barbara. It was like October. It was warm. It was still. I went down for my swim at Miramar Beach. I thought, wow, something is wrong here. We need a breath of air. It's like you couldn't breathe. And I suddenly realized that it was a comparison that the pulse of the ocean is getting weak. That what should be swimming around out there, and you know, the kelp beds and the seashells. Remember seashells that you used to see on the beach? They're gone. They're gone. And we've got, I'm going to be showing you a quick little video we took so you can see this. You know, some things are better. Our awareness is better. I have to confess, you know, in the 60s when I started diving out at the islands, does anybody remember Glenn Miller? He had the coral sea. He was really a character, and we used to go out to the islands, and somewhere halfway in the middle of the channel, we took those trash cans and threw them overboard. I know it just seems so shocking to me now that we do that. Our awareness level is better. None of us would do anything like that. I mean, if you have a dog on the beach that poos and the person goes off, everybody starts screaming now. I mean, slowly things are turning around. So basically, back to my premise, is that we have to do this ourselves. We cannot rely on government to do it for us. There are just a couple things that I'm going to point out to you from this incredible book that somebody gave me recently, Waking Up in Time. which is a double entendre. Time meaning black, like Hawking theory of time. And it's all about man's 50,000-year dash through this thing, which is a very infant, in the space of Big Bang and evolution. This is going awfully fast, what we're doing. When you look at things like ozone and what they said, it's on the internet today, the global warming is worth anyway. But anyway, back to the solution. I've asked myself, is this so huge that I'm just beating my head on the wall? Is this doable? Well, what's the other alternative? To just sit here and do nothing and watch it? We all have to do our part. And my absolute credo is that we do it ourselves. We get it together and we come up with solutions. And we help the bureaucrats do this too. And if they won't help us, we'll ask them to get out of the way. But this quote stuck right into my head. It's at the top of this chapter called Crossroads and Choosing Our Way. It's a quote from Albert Einstein. He says, "No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it." So we have to come at this differently. And you know what? This isn't a big fancy thing. You know what it is? It's we get out our mops and our broom and we start cleaning up. And we find the money to do this. So I think it's important not to blame politicians. They, as I've gone through this, I'm convinced that it's not the politician's fault, but bureaucracy itself. Let me give you an example. John Robinson, who is on the Heal the Ocean board, we strategized together. This guy is a brain. He's a very interesting man. He was he was the head of NOAA's team that cleaned up the Exxon Valdez oil spill. He was also this country's chief scientist to clean up the Kuwait oil fires. This guy is gnarly, as they say. And John, for Heal the Ocean, did this mapping of the septic system and sewer system before the last year. We didn't even know who was on septic, who was on sewer, who was doing what. And John has a geodigital mapping company, and he hired some young college kids, and they called up all the sanitary districts, and they found out who was on sewer, and by that they deduced who was not. And so we went to the Board of Supervisors and said, here's the present, Santa Barbara's in 4 quadrants. So we did 1 quadrant, John did. Then we went to the Board of Supervisors and turned on the screen and said, here it is, and here's this map, and here's all the green represents this, and all the oranges represent this, and you take this clicker and you click on the neighborhood, then you get all the lots. Then you click on the lot, you get the name, phone number, and then you know exactly who this is. So John had started actually looking at the soils and slopes, septic. We've got a lot of septic systems that are not on suitable soil, and they're in slopes, and they're next to creeks and all this stuff. And so he was identifying the problem areas. And there are 3 major problem areas in Santa Barbara. One is in the Carpinteria foothills, Carpinteria Montecito foothills. The other one is Hope Ranch, and the other one is in Los Olivos, where there's just heavy use, putting this stuff in the ground. And then along the beaches, obviously, and next to creeks. So anyway, but John has started this soil study. So I'd heard that environmental health got $250,000 for soil studies. And so I called up John. I said, John, weren't you started on this, and weren't you somewhere along with this? And he said, well, yes. And I said, well, give me a quote, how much it would be for you to do this study. So he thought about it, and he called me back in about a day, and he said $125,000. So I called up environmental health. I'm naive. Called up environmental health and said, hey, I can save you $125,000. With that, you can go hire an environmental cop or something. Well, that's not the way it works. You guys in this room probably know how it really does work. And that is, when Sacramento puts through a bill or puts through, an appropriation for this $250,000. They have to spend it. They can't spend it on anything else. They can't save money. They can't say, well, you know, we'll spend 125 here. They lose it. So when I offered this environmental health, not knowing how this works, they just said, oh, you know, we haven't, you know. So you have to, even if you need money for something, you have to back up even further and go through the rigmarole to get it. But so it's not the personal, like, you know, as Heal the Ocean got started, we had to get organized. And I mean, I love politics. It's just like playing chess, and you're going to move there, okay, I'll move here, and if you do this, well, then how this, and what's logic, and let's put this together. But when it comes to the organization, I just like, and so we hired a grant writer. The grant writer, it's like Sacramento. You have to sit down and define your program, and in January, the project manager will do this, and X amount of hours. And I went berserk. I've told this story before. And I finally looked at the grant writer. I said, can't you just tell them that we need cannonballs for our loose cannons? It doesn't work that way, and you have to really get disciplined. Anyway, so basically, the submarine world, I'm going to show you some visuals now because it's very, very, very important that we realize what we're doing. That is the main thing. And one of the things I love, you know, now I've confessed that I'm not really hot for organizational stuff, but I just love eco-terrorism. No. I love going in there and saying, here's what's going on, and taking cameras. And because, you know, the ocean, it's submarine. It's subconscious. It's down. It's out of sight, out of mind. So with my wonderful board of directors, and I have an advisory board as well, of people that are really active in helping us do these various things we need to do. And this urchin diver, Jeff Mawson, who is in this audience, there he is. Wave your hand, Jeff. He calls me up and he says, Hillary, let's go dive the sewer out falls. I got a camera, let's go do this. Well, we did this, and I'm going to show you this. I'm also going to show you, before I show you this, because there was a reason we did this, not just to make a film and, you know, shock people, but also to take it to our planning commission, our politicians, say, you know, this is what's going on. You know, you stand at the Biltmore and look out at Butterfly Beach, and oh, it's just such a lovely day. And oh, you cannot see in 20 feet of water that stuff that is spilling out of there. And little kids playing around, and you just look at this and say, this is insane. So my job is to tell everybody that this is insane, and we're all insane. So the first thing, what we did, one of our issues, was a basic problem, is using the ocean as a dump. Using the ocean to dilute, you know, the pollution to solution, dilution. That is our basic problem, and we haven't snapped out of it because we can't see it. So the first thing, the Planning Commission was, there are two parts of this 3-minute video. It's very short. Two things that we were questioning is this question of dredging, you know, just dumping all this stuff into the ocean, just, you know, nonstop. We realized the necessity of keeping the harbor channel open so boats can get in and out, you know, the federal harbor channel, federal navigation channel. But when the city comes up with the plan to dig out, they called it sediment management plan, to dig out, you know, you've got to keep the marinas, the boats will go aground and so on, but they haven't tested the bottom of that harbor in 13 years. They said, oh, we tested near there, we tested near there. So we have trouble with that because we know that people pump their stuff into the harbor. Maybe, you know, but likely. But it hasn't been looked at. The biggest problem we had was this plan to dig up West Beach, which is that big wide beach in front of Andrea's restaurant. you know, where the sea landing is, that goes way out, well, that's 186,000 cubic square, cubic yards of stuff, which adds up to, I don't know how many, 10,000 truckloads, and just back it up the ocean and pump it out there. And that stuff has been collecting there for how long? From Mission Creek and all this stuff. Well, maybe it's really clean. They do some core and say it's really clean. But how much of this is smothering the sea life? We all know the shells aren't there, the sea animals aren't there, the tidal life isn't there, and this constant. They want to keep that dredge running for 5 months out of the year. First of all, you can't swim between, nobody in their right mind would swim between sea landing and the East Beach Pavilion. I mean, the ocean is as black as my pants. It's really something. So we went to the Planning Commission, and very often it's like engineers sitting and designing stuff, and they don't go out there and actually try it. We went to the Planning Commission. We said, this is what it looks like. And then you're going to see the underwater video of what it's done on the last 2 days of the last dredge cycle. Not this year, last year. And this is what the ocean looks like downstream off of Hammond's Reef, which is where I used to dive as a kid, and which had lobsters and fish and kelp and all this stuff. So now you're going to see first just a few slides. Brett? Oh, I have the thing. So this is what it looks like from the surface. Then we're going to show you underwater. They call it beach nourishment. Am I in somebody's way? Beach nourishment. Well, pardon me?
What's getting nourished?
Well, see, the sand gets stuck, and they want to pick it up and move it down so the beaches can be nourished with sand. And this is what it actually looks like. You drive up there, and I can't imagine. You know what? One scientist showed up at the Planning Commission and said, this dredge is in the wrong place. It should be in front of Bess Parker's hotel. And nobody went for that. But here it is. And while I was taking these pictures, it was really back to the rolling blackout, back to getting used to this stuff. There was a jogger, and she just jumped over this pipe, and like she's done it every day. But this is what happens to the beach as they get into their operations. And here, see that? I'm taking a picture of that's where it's coming out. And all those birds are just digging all that stuff that's getting dug up. And there it is. And it's just black down the coast. So I went running in there with my Tupperware, and the Army Corps of Engineers were screaming at me, get away, this is dangerous. I said, what do you think those crabs think out there? So now we're going to show you the video. Leave the lights off, please. And this, Jeff Lawson he just did this voluntarily, made this little film. Okay, this is the area off of the Biltmore, off of Hammond's. Everything you're seeing is the only life that's there. And Jeff, being an urchin diver, he and I diving together, this is me looking at this stuff. These urchins are dead, malnourished. And this is what the sea floor looks like. The spines are deformed. It's not a normal urchin. We did not see, if you see a fish, let me know, but I haven't seen one yet. And so this was an area that many of us dive quite a lot. And we were asking the Planning Commission, this is the only thing we saw, that crab is alive, barely. And we said, look at the silt. with Jeff, and we said to the Planning Commission, we don't know how much this dredging is contributing to this. But we have to. We're trying to get it to move. It does. It is. So they didn't like looking at this at all. But they passed it. They said, well, we'll add an underwater monitoring program. So they can film it as it all, you know. So the dredge spoils, you know, maybe they're clean, but it's the animals can't breathe, and the kelp can't live when we're dumping this kind of thing.
That's been gone for quite a long time.
Yeah, but it's this accumulation of years and years of doing this. It's been said that, well, dredging is no different than rivers running out to the ocean. You know, rivers cause a lot of siltation, but do we have to add to it? There's another solution to this, which I'll get into this later. Okay, so now this is sewage right here. This is the El Estero sewage outfall. That's sewage. It looks really healthy. This is a diffuser pipe. And in the ocean, animals will come and grow on anything that's in the ocean, like a pipe or a shipwreck. So it looks really nice. But this is the actual, what sewage looks like. Now this is in 70 feet of water.
This pipe is coming from sewage plant?
El Estero sewage outfall. That's the city's outfall pipe.
Can't they do a reclamation thing and use it differently, use the water differently?
Well, I'll mention that. Because we've done a reclamation study, how much we can reclaim of this. But see, here's another hole. Somebody that is a scientist slowed this film way down and said that all this chunk are illegal. But when you go into the sewer plant and go into their conference room, they have these gin clear beakers and say, this is what we're putting in the ocean. We said, well, we'll show you what we found.
So this is how many, 20 feet of water you said?
70 feet.
How far out are you?
This is further out than the three that are dumping. We have some other footage of the closer one. So I decided to take a bottom sample. I'm sorry?
How far
Out? It's a mile and a half. And El Estero, we just heal the ocean. I'll get into this, but we're doing virus testing with USC, and our last test in November, the polio viruses in this sewage were so strong, they were as strong as a straight polio hit. But this is all...
So they're saying it's treated water? They're saying it's been treated?
They're saying it's secondary treatment. It's secondary treatment. They chlorinate, and they just relax the chlorination, which we don't believe.
We're about a mile out off the Santa Barbara on the El Estero outfall. Jeff Boston and I swam along the pipe, saw the diffuser spewing out in the ocean. We took the bottom sample right next to the pipe. It's really hard to do. Oh, what am I into? The diffuser, as you're swimming along the pipe, is, the visibility isn't real great, but, you can see through the water, and then all of a sudden the water changes to thermocline, if the heat change, if the sediment change, everything, and so there's spews out, and then it stops, then you go a little bit further, and then you see another one and another one. We swam to the end of the pipe to where we couldn't see anything anymore, then we turned around and came back. When I picked this, when we got this into the bottom, it really didn't even look that black, from the surface. What's covering the bottom is like a sediment that's not that dark, but digging down, you've got this. So we're going to test it. What's that? What's dirty? There's a boil right there. Is it boil?
See, this is what it looks like coming up. And we have this coming up Goleta, Santa Barbara.
I mean, we are putting this in the ocean, in the same ocean that we are taking our fish from.
Is 5
This
pipes
is the
or
ocean
3
that
pipes?
is...
5 pipes or 3 pipes?
We have 5.
It's like the sanitary district guys put these clear beakers of water, on the table. Wasn't that clear? It looked like it came out of tap water. Well, that's not what was coming out of it. The knowledge was coming out of it. I mean, this is a collection of sediment, but what was coming out of there was a brown fog. What?
This is the end.
Studies about dumping things like this to see blocking plankton growth. Plankton can't settle. So we are killing this tons and tons and tons of
That's bacteria soap, you guys.
without even knowing it. And blaming fishermen. This whole thing of sewage disposal at sea with our seafood, there's actually life. There's a lot of life on the pipe itself. Then you go into the pipe and the whole seafloor is just this sludge. You'll call the rain. Sure, the ocean's full of life, but it's the kind of life that you really like your mudworms and so on. It never made sense to me that we're putting sewage in with our seafood.
There's something I referred to in this film that I want to explain to you that is the real unseen tragedy. Dan Morse is a scientist out at UCSB. And he's a revolutionary scientist. He's a genetic physicist. He studies molecular biology. Anyway. So he determined that through these various, through his research, something about plankton that is so unreal and so beautiful and something that you don't hear a lot about. But plankton is the source of all life in the sea. It's the crabs, the lobsters, the clams, the mussels, they float along as plankton, which is just like microscopic head of a pin size. And I always thought, well, they get bigger and bigger, and then finally they get heavy and go bloop and fall to the bottom and grow. That is not how it works. If the red abalone, I'll just use the red abalone as an example, the red abalone drops down just from sheer weight into the sand bottom, it's going to not have anything to eat and die. What happened, Dan figured out, it's some way of a name this long of some kind of a amino thing that it's a signaling device. And the red algae actually signals that little red abalone. And the red abalone goes bloop to the red algae. And the glue in barnacles signals the barnacle saying, come here. And the mussels, and all the rest. And when we dump into the ocean, we are blocking that signaling. It's as delicate as a human brain. The ocean, it is a form of our own bodies in so many ways. But the signaling is as delicate as the human brain. And when we are dumping and dumping and dumping and dredging and putting this stuff in, that is what we're doing that is not even seen. That's why I say we're blaming fishermen. You know, yes, there's overfishing, yes, there are problems that, you know, I don't argue that. But on a wide scale, our practice, our social society practices have not paid attention to the workings of the ocean. And it's about time that we get with it and realize that by putting this in, we are committing there are billions and billions and billions of sea animals that are never getting a chance to live at all. So you don't even see them disappear. There's been some horrible statistic about plankton in the ocean being reduced by 60%, maybe even more. A lot of it has to do with global warming, the seas warming up, but a lot of it we have to look at our dumping. All right, so just real quick, how are we doing? All right, we're going to wrap this up, but from this book, I want to just, what's important is the will to change. We do not lack the science and technology to tackle most of the problems facing us. In almost every area, we know what needs to be done to restore the environment and keep it in a healthy state. Where we do not yet have the necessary means, we know how to begin developing them. Nor are we short of the money needed to mend the world. The World Watch Institute in Washington, D.C. has estimated that the total cost of a 6-year program to protect the soil, reforest the land, reduce population growth, retire the debts of the developing countries, raise energy efficiency, and develop renewable sources of energy would amount to around $750 billion. A lot, yes, but no more than the world currently spends on arms in just 1 year. All that we lack is the will. Are we prepared to reconsider our priorities?
You know, we had to figure what we're protecting ourselves from with these arms, with that amount of money.
We need to look at our own backyards, definitely. All right, real quick. So, what Heal the Ocean is looking at this, and there are times I personally have just thought, oh my God, you know, if this even do it. But when you look at it practically, and like in the case of the Rincon, and put it down to 9,000, and find the 9,000, and figure this out, all of this stuff is doable.